Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a user named True Evil Incarnate in the AITAH subreddit. The post is titled WIBTAH if I called out my MIL for literally putting my husband last. TLDR, my mill picked my junkie Bill over my husband after a traumatic event occurred, and I am considering yelling at her about it. I am 29 and my 33M husband was hit by a car while on his e-bike 3 weeks ago, and luckily he survived and didn't break a single bone. He did suffer a traumatic brain bleed though. While he has been home recovering, he's been having lots of various symptoms along with some bottled mental health decline that he thinks he's hiding. This man is usually very stoic, calm, and collected, and usually if anything on the angry side, but he has been crying at the drop of a hat, left and right. Even he knows it's odd. Ever since his accident, I've been in contact with his mom, keeping her updated as she lives across the country and couldn't be by his side like I and his brother were. This is important because when my husband was a very young child, he had an extremely rare blood clot occur that caused permanent optical nerve damage in one eye, and his mother is the knower of that whole period of his life, as she spent every day with him for a full year in the hospital working to get his sight back. His previous clot made this new bleed very dangerous, so keeping my mill in the know was and is a must. My bill only hung around for the first 2 days and then gave up on caring and left, and at some point a week and a half after the accident, my MIL stopped answering texts about the updates entirely. My husband blew it off as his mom thinking no news is good news as a better option, but I found it to be a jerk move. Suddenly, last week, she texted saying she and her partner were coming to visit this week. When I talked with her sister, who lives near her, she said my MIL had been frantically trying to find cheap flights to come see my husband. Said husband got very excited visibly, but then blew it off and said, okay, cool. I knew he's been missing her as she only moved away due to some trouble between our families that resolved itself in an odd way. No hard feelings between anybody, just weird living situations. He's also been so emotionally unstable that I think he really just needs her around. We've been together for 11 years and he's nowhere near alone, but she's still his mother nonetheless. Plus, she's an absolutely wonderful woman in many ways, so she's great to have around when you feel like shit. She didn't tell us a day, so when she texted me this afternoon suddenly saying that she was driving back from her sister's house, would be visiting my BIL, getting a motel, then stopping to say hi, you can say we were both surprised and both feeling a mixture of happiness but also sadness. The sadness is because of her choice of people to visit. The airport she landed at is 30 minutes north of where my husband and I live. She decided, instead of immediately coming to check on her son, who is lucky to be alive, to instead travel over 2 hours north from the airport to visit her 3-year-old granddaughter at her sister's house. My BIL and his girlfriend have severe drug issues, so my aunt-in-law has custody of her for now until they get their shit together. Then she left there to travel 2 hours south back towards us to visit my BIL, then get a motel in his town, then maybe come say hi if it's not too late for her. My husband said this was fine, but I could tell he was upset because he started tearing up. He kept blowing it off, but it really made me mad. Then 5 hours later, as I suspected would happen, my mill called to say that she was tired from driving and her plane trip and that she was going to go to sleep and see us whenever tomorrow. My husband quietly broke down, denying his emotions and saying he's fine. He doesn't know why he's reacting this way. So would I be the jerk for telling my mill she's a jerk, made my husband cry, and while I understand she's stressed out herself dealing with my BIL and his bullshit, but that she needs to stop putting my husband last to placate the piece of shit she should have aborted, that her firstborn son that she spent so much time and effort taking care of almost died and wants his mother to the point of crying like a baby, and that directly doing everything but coming to see him broke his heart to bits. The reason I word it that way is because my BIL has a massive second child complex where he thinks my husband is the favorite because he was born first. And due to his childhood medical issues, he more used that as ammo to my EMIL as to how my husband is her supposed favorite. Note, he's 31 and is still doing this shit. It doesn't help that she's a massive pushover who lets this shit happen in the first place. But she always does what Bill says and bends to his will. Every time she visits, we only see her once for a few hours out of her week-long stay, because my child of a Bill wants his mommy to himself, and she caves. My husband likes to keep to himself, so he says it's fine, but I can tell he thinks his brother is the favorite, and it makes him cringe internally and seethe with pain. I don't know when she's going to be here tomorrow, but I really want to lay into her. My husband says, leave it be. She's got a lot on her plate. I called BS. She's literally on vacation right now. There's nothing on her plate. She should have come to see him first. Whether she plans on spending a whole day with him tomorrow or whatever, it doesn't matter. She said she missed him and desperately wanted to see him and hug him, but when it came down to it, she'd rather go cuddle with a baby who barely knows her than travel to a different location entirely to visit that baby's shitty father instead. Then not even show up at all. I think I'd be in the right by calling her out, but I think I would also be an asshole because she's a usually wonderful woman who has helped us so much throughout the years, is dealing with a stupid man-child and trying to help him get his daughter back, which is saintly itself considering he doesn't deserve anyone's help in general. She really doesn't deserve someone yelling at her, but I can't just sit here while my sun and stars breaks to pieces. Also, since my own mother's death and our previous relationship, I've been a bit touchy on the subject of how mothers and children should treat each other, but I don't want to make my mill cry just because I'm being a jerk. If anyone can give some advice, that'd be swell. I'd like to be able to say something tomorrow, but I'll wait and see what the internet says because my echo chamber is too small at home. Thank you all and happy scrolling. Edit. In case anyone wonders why I shit on my bill so hard, it doesn't like my use of the word junkie. Well, I apologize, but my bill is not a good person from the get-go and drugs do not help. Explaining all the horrible things he has done is its own story itself. Also, the past 4 times she has come to visit is because of BL asking her to, along with giving him lots of money, paying for multiple week-long trips for him and his little family to visit her. He acts like everyone hates him when he's handed everything, and don't get me going. User Flirty Diane said NTA, your Mill's actions are hurtful and prioritize your bill over your husband, especially given his recent trauma. It's understandable you want to advocate for your husband, but consider a calm conversation with your Mill instead of yelling, expressing your disappointment, and highlighting your husband's need for her support. User Kautami said, wait and see. Is it possible she got those visits out of the way so that she could spend the remainder of the time with your husband? You don't have to agree with her logic if that's the case, but it's not unreasonable if it was. User Hungry for Chili said, no doubt you have every right to be hurt and so does your husband. Bill is a cad to be pulling this level of a guilt trip on your Mill, but your Mill also has to learn to lay down her guilt over abandoning her other baby to care so intensively and for so long for her firstborn baby. My perspective, I'm your Bill minus the drug addiction and general issues. My elder sibling was the high medical needs child for most of our childhood and into teenage years, and I absolutely suffered from being effectively benevolently neglected by my parents for it. I know they loved me, but I really didn't feel cared for most of my upbringing, if that makes sense. My parents, in particular my mom, were really invested in helping my sibling, and while I never suffered what would traditionally be considered neglect, it still happened in a sense. A number of events finally happened where I kind of exploded one day, and I let my mom know how badly it had hurt to have been put second for so long. I pointed out that it was continuing into adulthood despite my sibling being better. My mom changed her behavior and has been much more sensitive ever since. It's balanced out now. However, where my jerk of a Bill and I differ is that I didn't attempt to keep milking that guilt I know my mom feels. If I did, my mom would rightfully remind me that balance is what we needed as a family, not suddenly ditching my sibling to show me some favoritism to make up for all those years. So consider approaching your otherwise kind but pushover Mill with equal parts empathy and sternness. She needs a reality check, and frankly, she might actually appreciate someone pointing out the inequality of this scenario and giving her permission to put some boundaries around her second son's behavior and expectations. Likely, she sees him as being the next child who needs rescuing, and since it worked so well for the first child, maybe she can save this one as well. Not recognizing possibly that the circumstances are totally different. Your husband was a child who had a medical condition, her second son is choosing to indulge in his addictions and all of the nasty responsibility-shifting behaviors of a junkie. She might appreciate the wake-up call and the release of needing to be there for Bill, really. Hope that gives another perspective, even if it's wrong. Best of luck, and glad that your husband is okay, though I'm also sorry for him feeling that he needs to hide his emotions to deal with them. Both brothers need to read Running on Empty, I think. A couple of days later, OP provided an update. TLDR, well, I said something only after everything spiraled, and now my husband is back in ICU waiting for CT scan results again. My BIL is sitting in the police station. My MIL and SIL are at a separate hospital ER, and I'm just sitting here staring at my husband with his aunt hovering around, and I just don't know what to do anymore. To sum up the OG story, since I can't link it here, my MIL was coming to visit under the guise of visiting my husband because he was hit by a car 3 weeks ago, and his mother desperately wanted to see him, but that was a ruse, and she spent the whole first day with my junkie Bill, and I was waiting until we finally saw her to confront her about putting my husband last behind a piece of shit who doesn't deserve anyone's respect, as my husband is extremely depressed and has been having emotional breakdowns at the slightest thing, and this is killing him because he just wants his mom to be there for him, and she started ghosting him instead. Well, here's what happened. Yesterday, my husband and I waited all day for my MIL to call when she was going to come over to say hi. I had to text her at 1 p.m. because I was starting to get really pissed off. She hadn't said anything yet, and her response led to me punching a wall without thinking. She said that they were out to lunch with Bill, Sil, and their daughter, who they got to have a surprise visitation day with. She said after lunch, when my niece went home at 3 p.m., she would come see us. I was furious, but whatever. My husband was clearly distraught, but again playing it off. Eventually, around 5:30 p.m., we got a call from my MIL saying she was coming over. Well, finally, we made a plan for her to come to pick us up so we could get pizza for dinner, and I laid out a whole idea my husband came up with to get some pizza, go see a movie, and maybe go play some pool afterward because that's a pastime his mother loves. Well, nope, Mill said she needs to return to Bill's house, so she'll be picking us up to get pizza, and then we're gonna go see Bill and Sil afterward. So we went with that plan for the sake of not starting an argument. When she showed up, she was nice enough to come up to our apartment to say hi to my dad, who lives with us but wanted to leave right away. The only reason we didn't was because my EMIL brought her sister, who hasn't lived in the area or even visited for 30 years, but apparently came with EMIL to see my husband specifically. She sat with my dad asking a bunch of questions, was looking through all the hospital paperwork and accident reports, etc. Honestly, stuff his own mother should have been doing but wasn't, and was instead just chatting with my dad and trying to scoot everyone out the door. After a while, we left and got pizza, and Mill took us to Bill's place. We spent 2 hours sitting there talking about Bill and how awful his life is. He quit his job because it sucks, his car is broken again, he wants this and that, but can't get it because everyone keeps fighting him. Meanwhile, my husband was getting sicker and sicker looking, and Kay and I were constantly bugging him to sit or drink something or even get ready to go to the hospital because he didn't look good at all, and he was starting to get confused by stuff. Huge red flag. Now here's where everything spiraled. Kay suggested that maybe we take my husband home, at least because he was starting to sway in his seat, and she was guessing maybe he was just tired. My Sil, though, started freaking out, saying we need to call an ambulance. See, my SIL had a severe traumatic brain bleed happen years ago due to circumstances, and she is also a super empath. According to her, she could sense something was super wrong and that my husband needed to be seen right away without delay. Now, my husband usually would be refusing viciously at this point. He hates hospitals and especially hates ambulances, but he wasn't saying anything, so I knew something was wrong and started making the call. My Mill and Bill seemed maybe a little worried, but they kept playing it off, saying he's probably just tired, he probably needs to rest. It wasn't until my husband threw up all over the floor that they got the picture. I sat and handled the phone call while Kay and my Sil tended to my husband. Now, I don't know what happened because my back was turned when I was on the phone, but the next second, I heard a wicked loud yelp and then the sound of crashing glass, then lots of yelling. According to Kay, what happened was my Sil went to hold my husband's head as he was starting to go limp, so they were transferring him to a laying position, and my Sil ended up taking his head and laying it on her lap because their floor is hardwood and she was afraid he'd hit his head. Totally valid worry, and I thank her for it. My stupid Bill didn't like that though, and without thinking about anyone but himself, grabbed my Sil by the hair, picked her up by it, and threw her into their coffee table. Multiple things happened at once, and I can still see it in my mind's eye in slow-mo. First, my husband's head had apparently dropped to the ground, and Kay wasn't close enough to catch him, so he ended up hitting his head. At this point, I had turned around and saw Sil in a bloody pile of glass, Mill holding Bill back from trying to attack Sil while my husband was having a full grand mal seizure on the floor beside them, about to get stepped on. Panic doesn't even begin to describe the feeling I had. Even though unfortunate due to me having epilepsy, I understand and know seizure protocol. I was in a panic noting the time and all that jazz. I didn't even notice the EMTs and police show up. Apparently they heard the crash on the phone and assumed to send police as well. The ambulance scooped my husband when his seizure luckily stopped and rushed him to our chosen hospital and scooped my SIL off with my MIL to go to a separate hospital closer by. The one my husband was brought to is a level 4 trauma center and is better equipped. Kay drove behind us in the ambulance because apparently she's acting mother now, which at this point I don't even care about anymore. So now my shitty Bill is in the police station and has finally been arrested for his actions. Not sure if my SIL will continue with that, as this is not their first rodeo, nor do I know what will happen with my niece now. My Mill is staying with my SIL, so she's not alone, but she should really be swapped with Kay, and even Kay thinks so too. I asked Kay what's been going on with Mill and why lie and pull such a ruse, and she said she has no idea what's going on, but something does seem strange as this is totally outside of MIL's normal behavior. We don't suspect she's using drugs as she has pretty severe heart problems, but something's definitely up. But that doesn't matter at all to me right now. I did end up saying something to my MIL over the phone last night. I, as calmly as possible, just let her know how my husband has been taking her sudden neglect and told her hopefully this is a wake-up call to stop putting all her time, care, and attention to a wife-beating piece of crap. She's actually his longtime girlfriend, but the case still stands. Her response was stuttering and then silence. She's supposed to be here in half an hour, but now I don't even know if that's going to be a thing because supposedly Bill is going to be released sometime this morning on bail, so I assume she'll run off to be with him instead. Sil said no matter what, she'll walk here if she has to. Concerning my husband, he was brought straight past the ER directly to the ICU after being shoved through a CT scan. They said he has had a rebleed and it has grown 2 centimeters more than it was before, putting a lot more pressure on his brain, hence the seizure. I knew it was a risk, but it's awful to watch your universe convulse uncontrollably. I know my husband watches it happen to me constantly, but it's very surreal being on the other end of the situation. We're currently waiting for any news other than bad news, because so far it's been nothing but bad news, and if the bleed doesn't stop, they have to fly him to the big city nearby to one of the bigger hospitals to be prepped for surgery. I am freaking out, but no, there's nothing I can really do at this point but be here for him and divulge every bit of info anyone might ever need about him. I don't want my husband to die. If he dies, I literally won't be able to continue living in this world. So hopefully he lives and his mother comes to see him. Edit. Forgot to mention, Emil originally was only staying in town for 2 days. That second day she was in town was to be our only day with her. The next day she was planning to take Bill and his family to the beach and then travel up north again for the rest of her stay to be with her other sister. So the "this trip is to see you" line was as horseshit as I thought it was. Now I don't know what her plans are. User Cursed said, so your Mill is the sole reason why your husband and SIL are even in hospital because she orchestrated this entire situation, forcing your husband into a position that was extremely stressful and traumatic for someone with a recent brain injury. Why on earth are you trying to get this dangerous woman to be anywhere near your husband? She's a threat, a very serious threat. Treat her as such. It is better for your husband to be depressed by her absence than endangered by her presence. Tell her that. Tell the whole family that. Tell the world. And then focus solely on your husband and tell everyone else to keep their crap away from you while you get him through this. If she calls, you accept the call and lay out boundaries of what she can say, namely that the call is entirely centered around your husband and his health. Nothing about Bill or her is brought up, and if it is, you will immediately end the call. The same with visits. Be your husband's bouncer. I'll be honest, if I were in your shoes, my MIL wouldn't have dared behave this way because I simply would not allow it. She would have shown up when told and never dared suggest we leave the house. I hope you're realizing that you can't be passive or quiet about this. You need to be the authority in complete charge for as long as your husband needs to almost fully recover. Brain injuries are no joke, and anything that is even the tiniest threat to his health should be immediately removed from his surroundings. Under this comment, OP said the following: she's definitely never going to be in charge of this situation ever. What's odd is she's actually a very wonderful woman, and her recent attitudes and actions are not like her at all. It's like something is going on in the background, and she doesn't want to talk about it for some reason. I already told her last night that Bill is cut off entirely, and everyone gets to have limited visitation only under my allowance. My husband hasn't woken up yet, so he hasn't protested. He has been sleeping continuously since arriving at the hospital, only waking up when forced to. I only wanted her around because she usually is there for him when he's in need, and mentally, he really needs his mom with him. Now I regret even texting her. My husband is the one who wanted to go out and about, but I'm done letting him make decisions because I'm sick of him blowing off his health. Luckily, the latest CT scan said the bleed only grew more and hasn't worsened, but he's due for another CT in about an hour to check it again. My fingers couldn't be more crossed that it has stopped. User McCamp said if the aunt wants to step in as a mother role, let her. She knows there's a huge gap in her sister's skill set right now, and she's doing what she can to bridge the gap. She may be feeling guilt for letting this go on for so long. As long as she's helpful, let her. Not all family comes with strings attached. Under this comment, OP said, I love Kay, so I'm fine with it. She's such a nice person herself and is very outgoing, so she's been very helpful with my introverted, anxious self. I'm glad she's here because I can barely deal with talking to doctors. I can't stop crying when I do. Reddit is the only thing distracting me at this point. After another few days, we got another update. TLDR, husband is out of surgery with complications, Mill has come clean, Bill is awaiting trial for DV and possession, Sil is safe, not out of the clear by far. Hello everyone, I wasn't expecting such a turnout of well-wishers and concerned readers, and I appreciate everyone's comments of concern, advice, and overall support. It has made the time go by rather than be at a standstill. Now to the update, which will hopefully answer some concerns and questions y'all had. Shortly after my last update, my husband went in for another CT scan and things were looking good. No growth of the bleed whatsoever, so he was on a 6-hour watch until his next CT to see if he could be labeled as stable again. He made it 2 hours before having another grand mal seizure, luckily only lasting 2 minutes total. They weren't sure whether to give another CT right away due to a possible cluster, so after an hour or so, he went off for another CT. They also prepped the helicopter in case it was needed to fly him to the bigger city an hour away so that he could get surgery there, as the hospital we were at wasn't equipped for that. Turns out that seizure opened the hole and now the bleed was massive. It had reached about 5 centimeters and was leaking towards his ventricles. My husband was somehow conscious and his eyes were open, but he definitely was not all there and could barely speak. He did recognize me though, and he was able to remember and say our special goodbye that we say to each other before they took him off to the helicopter. I wanted to go with him, but they told me it would be better if I could drive because my weight would slow them down and they need the space. I called bullshit but didn't want to fight them too much and left with Kay as I am not able to drive. On the way to the city, I called my mill to see what was going on with Sil and informed them of the situation, as I had directly been ignoring their texts for the most part because I'd been staring at my husband for hours on end. Mill freaked out and said she was already on the road and that she would be on the way to the city as well. She also informed me Sil was with her and would be coming with, who then took the phone to inform me Bill was staying in jail for DV and drug possession, as he apparently had his daily dose of shenanigans in his pocket at the time of his arrest. SL also let me know that she was fine and that she just needed some stitches around her eyebrow because some glass cut her face. By the time I got to the hospital in the city, my husband was apparently already in surgery. The plan, I guess, was to stop the bleeding from the source itself and try to remove some of the built up blood because it was creating too much pressure on his brain. He had another seizure on the helicopter ride, and the bleed was even bigger, although they either never told me the size or I didn't even soak that in at that point. But at this point, the only thing that I could do was wait out the surgery and see what would happen next. I'm actually no stranger to waiting for close family to hopefully survive awful and life-threatening situations and surgeries. It's like a curse that followed me since I was 4. Death follows me like the plague, and other than my husband, I only have my dad left as living family. I prayed death would take the day off. My mill got to the hospital about half an hour after Kay and I. She was in hysterics, apologizing to me and Kay, and begging the doctors to let her into the surgery room at first, but then acquiescing when told it was too late to see him. I told her she needs to tone it down, and she's lucky I've even let her know where he is or what's even going on considering how she's been acting. And I honestly spent a good hour sitting there tearing into this woman. I loved my MIL and felt so hurt that she left my husband high and dry to cater to a monster. I hated her for using our softer sides against us to drag us to my Bill's house and into a living nightmare. She listened tearfully and ate every word I dished to her. I didn't feel better afterwards whatsoever. She was an absolute wreck and I could see it. Years of worry for my husband, dread and regret, sadness and understanding. She looked very broken and it made me feel so much worse. She's helped us so much for years. She housed us for free while we struggled for work, fed us with no questions, gave us rides and support in all times of need. Hell, this woman taught me to crochet, which is my favorite thing to do in this world besides my husband. Insert quirky laughter here. I'm currently too tired. So when she responded to me with what she did, I honestly wasn't surprised and a little pissed at myself for not seeing it in the first place and yelling at her as hard as I did. Apparently, my MIL and my SIL have been working for the past year to get my niece adopted by my MIL behind my Bill's back, along with all of our backs as well, because they wanted as few people to know as possible for the safety of my SIL. When my SIL overdosed a year ago and they lost custody of my niece, I guess when she was taken away, there were lots of stipulations to get her back. And while my SIL has gone through recovery and everything beautifully, my Bill was uncompliant and making the process complicated for no reason. He also was completely unresponsive and still is unresponsive to all correspondences and calls from CPS, so had no knowledge of any of the proceedings even though they sent him forms to sign. My MIL had flown them out to give them a vacation to hopefully restart their mentalities, and so she could get them started on a new path to life and hopefully get my Bill to become compliant. And I guess she made this decision when my Bill responded by stealing her car to roam around the city to find drugs and came back belligerent and abusive. So all the secrecy of this specific trip was because things were being finalized this week. Apparently, the paperwork was signed the day of what I will call the incident, and my MIL wanted all of us to get together that night so she could break the news to my BIL and so we could hopefully celebrate. She feels horrible for what happened and even somehow feels bad that my BIL still doesn't know yet because he has the right to since he's her father. I want to be there when he's told and his brain implodes honestly. I die of laughter in the parking lot. I asked her why she bothered and why not report BL sooner since she knew what was going on, and her response was that she didn't want to mess up the adoption. I told her that was extremely irresponsible and that Sil was at such a high risk. But Sil assured me that she wouldn't have had it any other way, and that things worked out perfectly. Well, other than my husband, obviously. She didn't mean that maliciously. She meant it factually. Nobody planned for my husband to decline so badly all of a sudden, which led to my Sil to go into helper mode, which apparently made my BIL jealous, which led to all of the events that unfolded until now so far. After all their explanations, I honestly was just numb, didn't know what to feel or think. I still kind of don't. I'm horrendously angry at both of them, and they both admitted that it doesn't excuse their fault in this, nor is my MMIL absolved from her crimes of abandoning her son in his time of need, and they've been saints since to repent, but I don't even know if I can be mad at them anymore. I know that they needed to dance around my BIL, so that's understandable. I just wish they had let us know. They apparently didn't because we are usually naturally LC, so they didn't see the point in saying anything. Bad excuse, and now my husband gets to suffer for their incompetence. I told my MIL and Scylla they're lucky I don't press charges against them, and they agreed that's fair and that they deserve whatever crap comes their way. 8 hours after going in, my husband came out of surgery alive. They supposedly closed the source of the bleed, but there was a lot more blood than was originally realized, and it created a lot of pressure. And I honestly don't care to type out all the medical bullshit they told me, but pretty much due to the scar tissue and permanent damage that was already present on my husband's optical nerves from his childhood clot. The pressure from the bleed created a massive strain on said optical nerves, and with the way things are, my husband is blind and will be for the time being until the inflammation from surgery and bleeding is absorbed, hopefully. My husband opened his eyes yesterday afternoon, unable to see entirely. He previously had 1.5 eyes worth of sight, and now he has none. He only remembers getting pizza and saying goodbye to me. Everything else in between was an empty space. He's having a lot of neurological issues so far, obviously, and his speech is extremely slurred, but he is alive, cognitive, and has motor function. He remembers me and his mother and remembers our special words and handhold. He is luckily still my husband so far. This is actually not his first time being blind, and he is actually surprisingly okay with it for now at least. He says it's kind of nostalgic in a way. I didn't want to worry him, but he kept asking questions, so I told him everything that has been going on from beginning to end. He fell asleep as I was telling him the story, and when he awoke later when the nurse came in to check on him, he asked for the rest. I know he needs to be resting, but my husband is the type of person who needs to know. He is an informational index that needs to constantly be fed, and it kills him to not know things and have answers withheld from him. I am so happy he is alive. Mill is extending her stay and will be staying with me in the city along with Sil, and they're paying for my hotel. Kay will be leaving in 2 days when the vacation is supposed to be over, as she can't miss work. We're all waiting for news on BIL and on the hospital that did the original surgery when my husband was a child, to see if anyone from the team might still possibly be in practice and have some insight as to where to go from here, as there's a lot of personal things I left out because this case is apparently very rare and has this teaching hospital in a frenzy. My husband's childhood event was a rare situation, so this is something that's never happened before so far from what they told us. I will update you all if anything happens since you all seem so invested in our nightmare. Sorry if I'm not so responsive as I've been obviously preoccupied. Also, I read a lot of the supportive comments to my husband last night and he fell asleep crying from your kind words. So thank all of you immensely. He really appreciates your support even though you're just strangers on the internet. He wants me to say, it's really cool if you consider how much the internet has helped people and stuff. And to those who stated I'm a pussy and this is my fault, you're damn right. Stay safe out there and watch out for Subarus, running stop signs please, and wear a f***ing helmet. Then after another week, OP posted another update. TLDR, husband is stable, Bill is in limbo, Sil is fine, and Mill went home for now. Howdy everyone who has found this. I'm using this Reddit as a diary at this point. I love reading the comments and venting the events out to someone other than family, as my husband and I don't really have friends as we're both pretty introverted. Not much to say so far other than my husband is still in the hospital and is still blind. They've contacted some of the old neurologists from his childhood but haven't gotten anywhere with research yet. The bleed hasn't grown but the swelling hasn't gone down much either. His blood pressure has been stable at least. My Mill had to go home. She was not happy about it, but she is planning to move back across the country to stay nearby rather than move my niece to her house, as was apparently the original plan before all this. She already has called a realtor to look at a house in the area as well, so she's all in on this, I guess. Therefore, she needed to go back with her partner to pack up their stuff and get things settled. I've been keeping her updated. She's been gone for 3 days so far and is due back sometime next week or so. My niece will remain at my aunt-in-law's house until she returns. My Sil is staying with me from now on. I haven't really been home minus to grab some stuff for my husband, so she's been staying there to help take care of my dad and my cats as well. Honestly, she's been an absolute saint. Luckily, her job is very flexible, so she has been able to take lots of time off for now while she helps me, which I severely appreciate. Plus, this all keeps her mind off of what's been going on with BIL. I don't know, I've just been working with my husband and the therapists and doctors every day, while also managing everything legally with the lawyers regarding the accident that started all this mess and all that jazz. It's been fun. I'm fine though, no need to worry about me. I've been enjoying this time with my husband the best I can. He's still definitely suffering many neurological complications that keep changing day to day, so it's hard to tell what's going to happen next, so we're just taking everything one day at a time. And Bill's first trial was rescheduled. He apparently tried to kill himself in holding when Esil contacted him to let him know what was going on with my husband. So they have him in some sort of mental health evaluation hold for now or something. Sil didn't explain it well, and I don't feel like researching right now. He doesn't know about my niece yet either. Esil decided to wait until he's seen someone to talk to first, like a therapist. I told her to just get it over with, and she's considering. The final update then came out a week after the previous update. TLDR, something happened to my Bill in jail, and when I laughed at the news, the whole family got butthurt at me for no reason, and I'm wondering now if I'm TA. I posted about my Emile a little while ago asking if I was the asshole for being mad at her for ignoring my husband after he almost died. To sum up what happened, my husband was hit by a car while on his bike over a month ago and received a lovely brain bleed, and after a few weeks of being home, he was hospitalized again and has gone blind due to a rebleed and swelling in his brain. The incident that caused the rebleed was stress due to my Mill and Sil devising an awful plan to have my husband and I there to hopefully keep my Bill calm while they broke the news to my BIL that my MIL has adopted his daughter since he can't get his shit together well enough to get her back from CPS, which didn't go well because my husband started to have a seizure and my BIL threw my SIL into a glass table for trying to help. For the record, my husband is still blind and hospitalized. Luckily, our insurance is covering his stay in ICU. They reached out to the doctors from his childhood and they actually ended up flying over to see my husband because they're amazed he's still alive after all this time. They've been working tirelessly with the staff here to help find a solution to get the swelling under control. My husband is still responsive, but is definitely becoming less and less attentive as the days go on, and the doctors are starting to get super worried. I don't want to post much about him right now. I don't want to jinx anything. My MIL ended up coming back after going home to sell her house, and she's been living at a new apartment she got in the same building my husband and I live in with my dad so she can stay close. My niece is absolutely loving life with her so far. My Sil is also staying with them for now, not sure what her plans are. Now my Bill and where I might be an asshole. He was put in jail for throwing my Sil into a glass table during the incident, and having a large amount of on him at the time of his arrest. When he was processed, I guess they told him what was going on with my husband, and he tried to kill himself somehow. Well, they put him into a mental hold for a couple of days, and then he had court, and they found him guilty, and he's supposed to be serving a good chunk of time. My Sil eventually broke the news to him over the phone that Mill adopted his daughter, that his brother is blind and he's possibly at fault, so on and so forth. Not sure how Sil laid it out, but if she was rude about it, I don't blame her. But apparently Bill couldn't handle the news and again tried to kill himself in jail. He also almost succeeded and is now sitting in a hospital getting both of his wrists rewired pretty much because he ripped his arms apart on a partially open grate. SL showed up about half an hour ago to tell me, I have barely left the hospital since my husband got to this one here. I couldn't help myself and the first thing I did was hysterically laugh for a good 30 seconds. To me, it's hilarious justice and that POS deserves so much more. But Sil got mad at me and told me I'm an asshole and stormed out. My husband also thought I was being an asshole. I retorted she shouldn't have brought such news to his sickbed and that his brother needs a massive dose of reality. Now my Mill has been texting me saying Asil is super mad at me and doesn't want to go feed my cats, which fine, my dad can, but I can't understand why she's so upset at me. It's ironic justice and I love that shit naturally anyways. My Mill even told me I'm a mega jerk for laughing. So am I. While yes, mental health issues are extremely important, I cannot feel sympathy for the POS who self-entitled his own brother into blindness after beating his girlfriend for trying to help during a medical emergency.